The previous lesson, we looked at storing values as variables. So we looked at different ways of naming conventions and how some of the more common types of values that we can store in variables. And there are additionally some other ways to store values within your JavaScript. And one of them is going to be arrays, and the other one's going to be objects. Now, arrays gives you a bunch of functionality that comes pre-built within the arrays, which we're going to be looking at in the upcoming lesson as well, and it allows you essentially to store multiple values within one variable. And there's a big advantage to using arrays and working with arrays because of the ways that you can handle all of those values that are contained within that one array. So let's take a look. Let's open up our editor and start creating some arrays. So I'm going to open up the editor. And these were initially the variables that we had looked at in the previous lesson. So in this lesson, we're going to simply look at creating some arrays. So I'm going to remove out this stuff that we have here before, because we don't really necessarily need any of this information. Maybe I'll just keep that click one button in case we do need to add some functionality, and create our first array. So the same way that we set up a variable var, we can set an array. So this is going to be maybe something, we'll call it my array. And the same thing where we're defining it equal to, but we use brackets. So we've got these square brackets that we're going to be using for arrays. And this type of array is what's called an implicit literal array. So there's a few different ways of different types of arrays. I'm going to show you essentially the three different types. So essentially they're all the same. They function within the same way. You can do the same functionality within them, but there's just different ways of defining your arrays. So this would be one way where we're doing variable myArray, and we've got an idea of our array values. So right off the bat, maybe if we want to have a variable called 1, so this would be my array would contain this value of 1, and whenever we want to output the array value, so I'm going to console log out, and just like what we did before, we do my array. But we need to identify which item we want to output from the array. So if I do my array 0, because arrays start at item 0, I should get the value that's contained within 1. Let's go back out and refresh it, and we see that we do get that first value being output. So again, remember that arrays start at 0. So this first item is a 0, or item 0, and it's equal to the value of 1. And the beauty about arrays is that we can contain multiple values. So I can have another value of 2, and this works the same way as what we looked at, how we can set the different types of variables. So we set up, initially we set up strings, string values, we set up numeric values, and we can do the same thing in arrays. And the format is going to be the same, and the idea is going to be the same. So string types are going to have quotes around it. Numbers don't need quotes, so you can just simply state the number. And even if we want to do Boolean, we can do a Boolean value as well. So maybe I can do something like this, a 4 or something. So my question to you is, how do we output this second item here? So how do we output 2? Showed you how we can output the value for 1. So what do you think we need to write within console log my array in order to output 2 within the console? So I'll let you think about that for a second, and remember again that arrays start at 0, so 0, 1, 2, 3. So 2 is actually going to be the second item within the array, but it's going to be position 1. So by default we start at 0, so at position 1 we have a value of 2, and when we refresh we go and we see that it is getting output within the console. It is very easy, straightforward, and logical how this gets output. So opening up our source code, I did mention that there are other ways to declare arrays. So let's say you had an array, so I'm going to do variable, and I'm going to call it my array, and maybe I'll give it my array B. So this one I'll change to my array A, and I got to update that there, or we're going to throw an error. So this one's going to be my array B, and I'm setting up as a new array here, and I'm going to need to declare that this is going to be an array. And within here, so this is a global object. It's a constructor for arrays. So essentially it's like setting up like a list of objects that are all contained together, but you might not have the definition of them. So if I want to set up an array and I don't know what I want to do with that array, I want to maybe set up a blank array, I can do it within this type of format. So this will work, but preferably we're doing it with my array A, as in this type of literal array. So this is the preferred way of setting up arrays if you've got values, but of course we can set up the array within that same type of format. So if I just copy this out, and if I do my array B, and we refresh it, we see that we get that same output. So we are able to do that same type of format within the runtime arrays, although it's not preferable that you do it within this way. So there's also, usually runtime is if you just want to set up an array, maybe you just want to set up a blank array, you're not really sure what you want to do with it, or you want to give it 5 slots right off the bat. And I'm just going to put console log C. So it's going to give us essentially 5 slots from that array, and I'll just output that my array, I'll output this one, and I'll output that one. So we're all the same here. Go back out and refresh it, and we see that we do have the first two look identical, and then the last one is just simply maybe a placeholder or blank array, so there's nothing in it right now. So if I was to call to the second item in the list, I wouldn't be able to return back anything because it's not defined. We don't have a second item in that list. And essentially that's what it would be used for, more to define if I've got some positioning in the array. And because I did define it as a value of 5, so essentially this is an empty array with 5 predefined slots already in it. And we'll see that once we start adding in additional items in the array, which I'm going to show you in the next lesson, we're going to see the actual difference between all of these ways of creating arrays. So that's coming up in the next lesson.